What is One Piece? Created in 1997 by Ichiro Oda, One Piece has grown into one of the biggest franchises in entertainment history. The series has over 100 manga volumes, over 1,000 anime episodes, multiple movies, games, and somehow several different versions of the anime itself. And after selling more than 600 million copies worldwide, One Piece has become one of the most influential pieces of media ever created. It's one of my favorite stories ever. There's just one problem. It is long. Over 1,000 episodes can be pretty intimidating, especially if you're new to the series or just want a refresher. So that's what this series is for. We're going through the entire story of One Piece arc by arc, covering all the important characters, fights, lore, and world building along the way, and also giving some of my own thoughts. So today, we're starting at the beginning with Romance Dawn. Gold Roger, the king of the pirates, is being executed. Roger was the man who conquered the seas and obtained everything the world had to offer: wealth, fame, and power. But before he dies, he says something that changes the world forever.
You want my treasure? You can have it. I left everything I gathered together in one place. Now you just have to find it.
That treasure is the One Piece. And with that single speech, the Great Pirate Era begins. Pirates from all over the world head out to sea searching for Roger's treasure, hoping to become the next king of the pirates. With that, Roger is destroyed. Real quick, we need to discuss the geography of this world. One Piece's Earth is mostly ocean. Stretching around the world is a massive continent called the Red Line, basically a giant wall dividing the seas. Crossing perpendicular to the Red Line is the Grand Line, a dangerous ocean route filled with unpredictable weather, sea monsters, bizarre islands, and anything else you can imagine. Together, the Red Line and Grand Line divide the world into 4 seas: the East Blue, the West Blue, the North Blue, and obviously the South Blue. Knowing how this world is laid out is incredibly important. Anyway, back to the story. Years after Roger's execution, we arrive in Fuchsia Village in the East Blue, home to a young boy named Monkey D. Luffy. At the time, the village is being visited by the red-haired pirates, led by Shanks. Luffy idolizes Shanks and desperately wants to become a pirate. To prove how serious he is, he literally stabs himself under the eye with a knife. Luffy tells Shanks about his dream. He wants to become a pirate. To Luffy, Shanks is the coolest person alive. The red-haired pirates spend their days partying, traveling the world, and doing whatever they want. To Luffy, that sounds like freedom. At this point, the red-haired pirates consist of Ben Beckman, Lucky Roo, Yasopp, Lime Juice, Hongo, Bonk Punch, and Monster. Most of these characters barely do anything right now, but trust me, Oda remembers every character he's ever created. Luffy constantly begs Shanks to let him join the crew, but Shanks always refuses because he's too young. Then one day, a mountain bandit named Higuma walks into the bar. This guy immediately starts causing problems. He smashes a bottle, insults Shanks, threatens the crew. Instead of doing anything, the red-haired pirates just laugh it off. Luffy is pissed. To him, pirates are supposed to be badasses who fight back when they're disrespected. But Shanks tells him that not every fight is worth having. Luffy doesn't understand at all. Luffy tries to storm out, but when Shanks grabs his arm to stop him, his arm stretches. Turns out he ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi, the Gum Gum fruit. This fruit is a devil fruit. Devil fruits are rare and expensive fruits that grant supernatural powers, but in exchange, the user loses the ability to swim forever, which sucks pretty hard in a world made almost entirely of ocean. Luffy is devastated. There are 3 main types of devil fruits. Zoan fruits let users transform into animals. Paramecia fruits grant strange superhuman abilities and are the most common type. Logia fruits allow users to become natural elements like fire, smoke, or lightning. These are considered the rarest and strongest. Luffy's fruit appears to be a paramecia. It gives him a rubber body that can stretch. Later, Luffy starts thinking Shanks might actually just be a pussy. After all, he let some random bandit disrespect him in front of everyone. Then Luffy runs into Higuma again. This goes badly. The bandits capture him, and suddenly the situation becomes very real. But just in time, the red-haired pirates arrive. And this is where the series reminds you that these guys are actual pirates. Higuma panics, grabs Luffy, and escapes out to sea. Once they're far enough away, he throws Luffy into the water, which is a major problem because Luffy cannot swim anymore. As Luffy sinks helplessly underwater, a massive sea king appears. These are giant sea monsters that roam the oceans, and this one is about to eat him alive. At the last second, Shanks arrives and saves him. But in the process, Shanks loses his left arm. Shanks stares directly at the Sea King, and the monster backs down immediately. Remember this moment for much, much later. After everything, Luffy finally understands. Shanks wasn't weak. He was simply on a completely different level. Soon after, the red-haired pirates prepare to leave Fuchsia Village. Luffy says goodbye, declaring that one day he'll become king of the pirates. Before leaving, Shanks places his straw hat on Luffy's head and tells him to return it once he becomes a great pirate. That straw hat becomes Luffy's greatest treasure. 10 years later, Luffy finally sets sail on his own journey. His goal is simple: recruit a crew, find the One Piece, become king of the pirates. And before leaving, he punches the exact same Sea King that almost ate him as a child. Everything I just discussed happened in only the first chapter. One thing I love about One Piece, Chapter 1, is how much of the entire story is already there from the beginning. People usually remember the big moments: Shanks losing his arm, Roger's execution, Luffy stabbing himself under the eye for no reason. But what makes the chapter so good is how clearly it defines what this story is actually about. It starts with Roger's execution, and immediately the world feels huge. One man dies, and somehow it creates an entire era. The Great Pirate Era isn't just background lore. It's the spark that gives everyone in the series permission to chase freedom, ambition, greed, adventure, whatever they want. Every pirate we meet later is kind of a consequence of that one moment. And then you have Luffy, who at this point is honestly just a kid pretending to be tougher than he is. That's something I think gets overlooked. Early Luffy isn't fearless. He wants to be fearless. There's a difference. When the Sea King attacks, Luffy freezes. He's terrified. He can't do anything. Shanks has to save him, and he loses his arm because of it. But what's cool is that the story doesn't treat fear as weakness. Luffy's development isn't becoming fearless. It's becoming someone who acts anyway. So later, when Luffy one-shots a Sea King when leaving Fuchsia Village, it isn't just there to look cool. It's payoff. It shows how much he's changed since he was a kid. Also, the foreshadowing for Hawkeye is cool too. Honestly, I doubt that Oda planned it from the beginning, but it is still cool in retrospect. At the time, it just looks like Shanks glaring really hard. Years later, you realize Oda basically showed Conqueror's Haki in Chapter 1 before the power system even existed officially. If you don't know what I'm talking about, stay tuned for a future video. That's part of why rereading early One Piece is so fun. Stuff that originally looked simple ends up connecting to massive ideas later. Even Shanks refusing to fight the mountain bandit says a lot about the series. In most shonen manga, the cool mentor character instantly destroys the guy disrespecting him. But Shanks just laughs it off. He spills drinks on him, insults him, and Shanks genuinely does not care. Because for Shanks, being a pirate isn't about ego. It's not about proving dominance every second. He only gets serious when someone threatens his friends. That scene quietly establishes one of the biggest themes in the entire story. Freedom also means choosing what's worth fighting over. And then there's Luffy's dream. What I like is that Chapter 1 never frames becoming Pirate King as ruling people or conquering the world. Even before the series directly says it, Luffy treats the title like it means ultimate freedom. That's why his goal feels different from characters who want power. Luffy doesn't want control. He wants the ability to go wherever he wants, meet whoever he wants, and live without restrictions, which is basically the core idea of One Piece as a whole. Adventure over authority. Freedom over status. And Chapter 1 somehow communicates all of that while still being a really simple story about a kid who likes pirates. That's why I think it's one of the strongest opening chapters in manga. Not because it explains everything, but because it quietly sets up almost everything. Moving on to the rest of the Romance Dawn arc. On some random island, we meet pirate captain Alvida. Alvida has one very important question for her crew. Who is the most beautiful woman on the sea? The joke here is that Alvida is very, very fat. Everyone on this ship is absolutely terrified of her, so every pirate says that she is the most beautiful. One of the crew members is a kid named Koby, who somehow accidentally ended up on Alvida's ship while fishing and has basically been trapped there ever since, as a cabin boy. Koby is a huge dork. Right now, at least. While cleaning the ship, Koby brings aboard a random barrel. The barrel explodes open. And of course, Luffy was sleeping it. Luffy tells Koby all about himself, including the fact that he wants to become the king of the pirates. Koby is shocked because his own dream is the exact opposite. He wants to join the Marines. The Marines are the world government's military force. They hunt criminals, stop pirates, and often abuse their authority. Koby also tells Luffy about a feared bounty hunter named Roronoa Zoro. The second Luffy hears about a strong guy with swords, he decides that he will recruit him. Eventually, Alvida confronts them. Luffy calls her ugly.
I know this! Hey, Koby, who's the fat lady?
Punches her across the ship, and he and Koby escape together. That's the last of Alvida for a little bit. Luffy and Koby arrive at Shell's Town, home of a marine base run by Axe Hand Morgan. Morgan is technically a marine captain, but he rules the town like a dictator. Giant statues of himself, terrified citizens, corrupt soldiers. At the base's courtyard, they finally find Zoro, tied to a post and starving like Jesus. Luffy and Koby climb over the wall to get a better look at Zoro, and they meet a little girl named Rika. She sneaks food to Zoro because she feels bad for him. Then Morgan's son, Helmeppo, shows up. Helmeppo somehow looks and acts exactly like someone named Helmeppo would. Helmeppo is a huge dick. He grabs the rice balls Rika made for Zoro, spits them out, and stomps on them just to be cruel. Koby is horrified because this is his first realization that Marines are not automatically good people. Luffy walks over and talks to Zoro, asking him to join his pirate crew. Zoro immediately says no because he has his own goals. Then he asks Luffy to feed him the nasty rice balls. And despite them being covered in dirt and spit, he eats them anyway, and asks Luffy to tell Rika they tasted good. That's the moment Koby realizes that Zoro might be an alright guy. Rika explains why Zoro was imprisoned in the first place. Helmeppo had a giant pet wolf terrorizing the town, and when it attacked Rika, Zoro killed it protecting her. And he got arrested. Captain Morgan had an agreement to release Zoro after a month without food. But then Helmeppo casually reveals they were planning to execute him anyway. Luffy is instantly furious. Zoro agrees to join Luffy if he gets his swords back, which is important because Zoro uses 3-sword style, 1 sword in each hand and 1 in his mouth. Nobody in this universe questions this. We then get Zoro's backstory. As a kid, he trained at a dojo alongside a girl named Kuina, the daughter of the dojo master. Kuina was the GOAT. She beat Zoro constantly, over and over again. No matter how hard he trained, he could never win. Eventually, Kuina breaks down crying and tells Zoro something her father said, that because she was a woman, she could never become the world's greatest swordsman. She says that one day boys would naturally become stronger than her. Zoro gets angry hearing this because to him, it disrespects all the effort he's spent trying to surpass her. He doesn't want excuses. He wants to beat her fairly. So the two make a promise. One of them will become the world's greatest swordsman. The next day, Kuina dies after supposedly falling down the stairs, which is still one of the most infamous deaths in anime because it sounds absurdly random. From that moment on, Zoro inherits her sword, the Wado Ichimonji, and takes on their shared dream as his own. Back in the present, Luffy retrieves Zoro's swords. Zoro officially agrees to join the crew, not because he cares about piracy, but because traveling with Luffy gives him the best chance of achieving his goal. Together, Luffy and Zoro defeat Helmeppo and Captain Morgan, and interestingly, the Marines stationed there are actually relieved Morgan is gone. Once he's defeated, they allow Luffy and Zoro to leave peacefully. Koby decides not to join them. Instead, he chooses to stay behind and pursue his dream of becoming a Marine. So the three part ways. Koby begins his Marine journey, Zoro becomes Luffy's first crewmate, and the Straw Hat Pirates are officially born, ending the Romance Dawn arc. The second half of the Romance Dawn arc, all the stuff with Alvida and Shellstown, isn't quite as good as the first chapter in my opinion, though it's definitely not terrible either. The biggest problem is honestly the villains. Alvida and Morgan are both pretty lame, no getting around it. Neither of them are very memorable or interesting compared to what One Piece eventually becomes known for later on. Helmeppo is mostly just annoying too, even if that's kind of the point of his character. That being said, I do think Koby is actually a really important character here. Through meeting Luffy and Zoro, he starts realizing that not all pirates are bad people. And then through Morgan and the corrupt Marines, he learns that not all Marines are good either. The world isn't just black and white, and that realization becomes incredibly important for his future development as a character and for why he wants to become a Marine in the first place. Roronoa Zoro is definitely the highlight of this part of the story, though. His introduction is great, his dynamic with Luffy works immediately, and his backstory with Quina is still really solid. It adds a lot more depth to him early on and shows that underneath the tough guy image, he's actually a caring and loyal person. Monkey D. Luffy is also good here. He's headstrong, determined, and completely set on getting Zoro to join the crew no matter what. Even this early on, you can already see the kind of captain he's going to become. Overall, I had a fun time revisiting the beginning of One Piece. It's rough around the edges at times, but it lays down a lot of the themes and character dynamics that make the series so great later on. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and stay tuned for part 2, where we meet Nami, Usopp, and Sanji.